Thank you for joining us for our inaugural episode of our podcast. I'm David Haight.
I'm Steve Bullin.
I'm Mike Determan.
And we are KineCritical. On today's show, Lara Croft, Sulu, Guardians, and Real Genius. All right, guys, so let's start off with the news with Lara Croft. They're remaking the video game series into another film. What are our thoughts?
Expected this coming. I mean, aren't they working on the third game now?
I think they're working on the third game. Come out on probably Xbox or PS4 next 2 years out. But I mean, we just got through, well, not just got through, but the Angelina Jolie films were not the best, right? We didn't really care for them, maybe?
I think a lot of their selling fact was just that it was Angelina Jolie, and that was kind of it. But they were fun romp. They were like the best game movies we had, essentially, for a long time. I want to say still kind of are. I think we don't have that many great video game movies yet, but they were very pulpy in the time, and that was kind of what the series was. But now they've kind of rebooted it and gone really heavy on the thematics. Like, a little over the top has been an argument that they're going too much into the like, oh, we're going to punish her, we're going to break her down, and they're kind of trying to get that cinematic feel as it is. It's been a long time coming. We'll see what they end up doing with that material.
I mean, I would have to say that the best video game movie is actually Tron, and I will say that is a fact, just a pure fact. I have never played any of the Tomb Raider games, so I'm really kind of up in the air on that one.
I'm gonna throw out like the best video game movie. I don't know about that. Might just be Wreck-It Ralph, even though it's not like actual game in property. It is now though. Fix It Felix, awesome. That's actually an arcade game now down in Arkansas. There's this really great arcade that I found called Arcadia, and it's $5 entry, and then you can play as long as you want. And he's got it's 200 or something machines spanning all the way back, and he's got like a little corner with the Atari, a little corner with like just everything. It's so cool. So if anyone's around there, go there. It's great. Look it up. But he actually has the Fix It Felix like arcade game. It's pretty cool. I would say that the best game movie, not video game movie, but game movie would be Clue. So it's a bit of a throwback. They had multiple endings. They'd have random which ending which theater got, and I thought that was the coolest thing.
But do we think that we can still make a video game movie at this point? I mean, we've had the failures of, well, not necessarily the failures. I mean, they're still making them. I think we're on Resident Evil 5 now coming out. We've gotten 2 Lara Croft movies going into a third. We just got the Warcraft movie. 3 Blood Rain movies. Not that they were... We'll try to forget about the Blood Rain movies. Sci-fi originals at best. But do we think that video game movies can be done right? I mean, obviously Hollywood has gotten their hands on the properties Last of Us, the Uncharted series, and they've just sat on it for like the last 2 or 3 years. We've gotten nothing out of it so far. We haven't heard a peep since they were purchased. And we covered that when it happened over in KineCritical's website. But what's your expectation here? Are we going in? I mean, we have the girl from Ex Machina. I think her name is Alicia Vikander, and we're trying to get her in here as a serious actress, coming out of a film where she was obviously a very strong female character, even if she was an android. But can we expect anything good coming narratively from these studios that have traditionally just used these properties as a way of just making extra money? They don't seem to care about the story or the characters. They just care about what those characters can do for them.
Well, in a lot of these games, like the Last of Us and whatnot, a lot of the argument from like the game criticism corner has been that any movie would just be the game without the gameplay. It would just be all of the cutscenes and all of the dialogue. And I think that's kind of a fair assessment. Like, what else can you do besides that? And I think the only thing they really have left is trying to explore some other corner of that game's universe, like with different characters. Yeah, I don't think they'd be able to really, without some degree of backlash, show some of the main characters without, like Ellie, who is based off a pretty obvious, like, which actor she's based off of, but she didn't really want anything to do with the property, and she was kind of upset about them using her likeness. But I don't think anyone would be able to stand in as the actor without it being her, and she wouldn't want to, so they'd have to do some other, like, tangent thing that's going on in the plot line. If that would actually be good is a completely different story.
Super Mario Brothers with Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo and Dennis Hopper. Come on. That is definitely a great movie.
The actors are fine. I was fine with the casting, but I really don't know because the whole thing is, it's the same thing as like a book to a film. It's not the same medium. And this is like not the same medium to a 10th degree because you can interact with games. And that's an obvious observation, but it leaves you feeling it's a different kind of story. Like you wouldn't want to watch a story necessarily about Link and then him do something that you wouldn't do. Like with games, there's kind of this inherent level of investment. It would be cool to watch something like that, but it wouldn't feel like Link as you play them. You know what I mean? Like I feel like this is a big part of why people get so invested in their characters and respond so violently online when there's something done to their property that they don't approve of. Like they are part of creating the world every time they experience that world. So their experience with video games is much more intimate, and so it becomes a much harder thing to translate. And we had the Warcraft translation recently, which kind of got a mixed bag of reviews. I haven't seen it.
I heard that if you're familiar with the storyline, or actually the pre-storyline, I'm not really familiar with WoW, that you'll appreciate it.
Yeah, I saw a mixed bag. I saw some saying that bits were great, some saying it was like the next Avatar where there's some great animation, and then others saying that they shoved in so much of lore that they forgot about actual story, like actual decent thematic line to follow through the whole movie. But I haven't seen it yet.
I have to agree. I mean, you can't spend 30 hours playing a video game and then go and watch a 2-hour movie and expect to have the same experience. I mean, they've been trying to do a Mass Effect movie for the last couple of years. You know, you'll hear the rumblings. It usually ends up being like an animated feature that is premiered somewhere in Texas that no one really goes to see. Then it ends up on Netflix for 10 minutes. And then you forget about it. But you spent 100+ hours playing one game. There's 3 of them. You're invested in those characters in a way that you can't get invested in the characters in a film. I mean, we have Lara Croft, who's wandering around and doing great stuff. She's the Indiana Jones of a video game universe. She's based off Indiana Jones. I mean, you can't take that character and translate it right into film and expect to have a positive response, just because the experience that you're getting out of the video game is going to be vastly different from the experience you're going to get out of the film. You can't just have the Indiana Jones experience with Lara Croft, because Lara Croft, even if she is the Indiana Jones of the video game world, is not Indiana Jones. They are not transferable. They're not interchangeable. So how are we going to work with this new film and try to invest ourselves in it when we've already invested ourselves in characters that are not necessarily related to this?
The other thing with that is, and I hate when this criticism comes across that a game is trying to be a film, because a game can't be a film, but thematically, like, the Uncharted series is cut for cut a action flick, and that is what they're trying to sell that experience in a game form. So to take the game translation of film and then go back to those tropes, isn't that just back into old territory that we already know? Like, what's really the point of that? Like, aren't we just going right back to old stories that we've gotten tired of? Like, we wanted to experience the stories, not watch them again. That was kind of the whole draw in the game.
I mean, if you've played Uncharted 4, maybe you'd be okay with that, because it's amazing. Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Prince of Persia. We're going to ignore Prince of Persia. So much potential, all lost.
I was going to say Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter are based on just fighting games, so you have liberty to make it a bigger story. So does it work that way? I mean, does it work better? Do those movies seem like they felt a little bit more enjoyable because they were just based on fighting games, so there was no real backstory or expectations? I mean, I haven't seen the Double Dragon movie, which I just realized there actually was one, and I loved that game when I was growing up. And yeah, I don't know, was there a Centipede movie? But it's not the same thing, is it, right? That wasn't the same thing, apparently.
I'm going to agree with you there. And I think maybe 5 years ago or so, I would have been really doubtful that you could make a good fighting game, because they would have this... It has the same problem as superhero movies, where it's like, well, you've got these 2 characters. You need to have them fight. You need to fit that in the story somehow. Like, I can just see the directors, like, watching their clock and be like, oh, no, we need to fit at least this much of the fight in. But we saw that work perfectly fine with the Avengers and the first, series of the Marvel movies, where they had independent characters and they had their story come out, and then they had them come together and they had them fight, and they had each go against each other for a little bit that was relevant to the story and it didn't detract from the story. You had Thor hitting Captain America's shield and like what would happen in this and all that, and they went along with the story and it worked perfectly fine. But at the same time, we've also seen them do that with Batman and Superman, and I feel like that is what would happen with most fighting movies, because they have this feeling that, okay, we've got all these fighting characters, we need to have them fight. Doesn't really need to be explained really well, but we're just gonna have them fight. The story, we'll shoehorn that in later. Like, they can buy the limited edition whatever where that actually makes sense. So it's one of those really touchy, like, it's definitely possible. I always think this is possible. Like, there's no way to say that, like, oh, something can't be a film, because someone can make it a film.
All right, so we're moving on to George Takei and his comments on Sulu becoming the first gay character in the Star Trek universe. I know that Takai wasn't terribly pleased that the character was suddenly gay. I think it's mostly to pay homage to Takai being one of the first notable gay celebrities and television actors. But I mean, I don't think it changes the character. I don't think we need it for Sulu to be any kind of different than what he is now. It's an added layer, I guess, but I don't think he's going to be having any romantic relationships in the last film. I would imagine if there was a romantic relationship, that might have been something they would have dropped in the trailer to try to get the LGBTQ audience to go see the movie.
I think with the digital age, we've kind of reached this really interesting point when it comes to PR, where you don't actually need to have it in the trailer. You just need to have a rumor about it for it to like make headlines, because every YouTuber and their grandmother will make a comment on it and they get lots of views. So I think part of like them sending these responses to Takai was basically that PR. So they don't really need to fit in a trailer. But one of the things that I read said that the scene that they'll end up having is a flashback of Sulu with his daughter and with his male counterpart. I think they were supposed to be married in that scene. I don't know if they were just married or a couple at that point. But I mean, there's been comments where that does kind of fit in canon, where Sulu's supposed to have a daughter, but it was never kind of referenced how he got that daughter or if he had a wife. Like it was said that the daughter was like the response of some steamy one-night interaction between some woman, which those things happen. But I kind of understand his concern, because no one wants to like be this actor who played this, one character and did really good job at this character, and then themselves come out of the closet, and then suddenly their character that they've worked so hard at becomes a token gay character. Fiction is not separated from its response, because anything that you hear about a movie beforehand will change your experience. That's just how it is. Like, it doesn't exist separate from the world around that creates it. Some of us, we grew up knowing Takai was gay because he had already come out, and so we grew up assuming that Sulu was kind of possibly gay, or to some degree on that spectrum. Like, that's kind of how I had seen it. And I didn't have a second thought about it, because throughout the series, whenever I watched them with my dad, it was, oh yeah, here's this one character who never mentions like having a wife or anything like that. So I wouldn't think that he has a wife. So it's kind of a weird, fuzzy middle line. And I completely understand his concern, because no one wants to be a token. And that's kind of what it would be remembered as, his character.
I kind of have to agree. It's one of those things where for me, it doesn't really affect me much. I'm just like, oh, okay, well, if it helps the character, if it helps the storyline, go for it. But if they're just doing it just to do it because he is, I mean, maybe shock value. I think at this point in our society, or even culture, there's no use in doing things like that for shock value anymore, because it's so mainstream, and we're so used to it. When I was growing up and watching, I had seen an article about Mrs. Doubtfire, and I didn't even think about it, but there was a gay couple in there as well, and it's just like, okay. As a child, you just don't even think about it. We just grew up in different times than a lot of people. So it's just like, okay, if the character is, they are. I don't care. Let's do it. Let's make this movie.
At the same time, though, it's part of like that LGBT community and whatnot. There's a different element in, like, especially with Mrs. Doubtfire, in that era of film. Like, it might have existed, but it was never plainly said, unless it was a quote-unquote gay film, unless it was The Birdcage or something like that. It was never openly stated, because to state it would suddenly be a political statement. So there's still kind of that heteronormative element in film, where not including them just ends up being, well, we go back to the fault of, oh, well, yeah, they're a little weird, but maybe they're not gay, or like these weird kind of assumptions like that. And saying that, our community and our world is so far removed from that, it is and it isn't. Like, we still have backlash happening with the Ghostbusters film because it's women. And some of the producers, it kind of looks like they've shoehorned in more like responses to that backlash in the film, like just kind of making fun of men's rights activists and whatnot, which it's kind of a weird thing to hear, that a movie in production is suddenly also, while it's being produced, making fun of its own critics. That this kind of amorphous, like, we can't actually really separate a film and just make it. It has to be this creation that is growing until the moment of release.
Everything is constantly being dissected by everybody. I don't know. I'm looking forward to the new Ghostbusters movie. Well, Melissa McCarthy's in there, right? Yeah. I do enjoy her. I'm sorry. She's hilarious.
Speaking of the new Ghostbusters movie, I'm looking at the Rotten Tomatoes page right now. They're at a 76 out of 77 reviews. I thought this was going to be one of the worst movies of the year. Turns out it's going to be one of the most okay movies of the year.
I'm actually more okay than that, considering the Ghostbusters 2 and how that was same line, different verse kind of thing. Like, it was more the same, and it didn't really do anything thematically with the thing. Like, it's kind of hard to call Ghostbusters a franchise, but at the same time, it has been franchised. Like, there's 2 stories, some comics, some, like, there's been a video game, and there's been a cartoon series, but they didn't really do much with it. Like, it was just kind of playing off that beloved classic and, you know, all of the great stuff that was inside there. I'm looking forward to this. I'm actually really happy that it is getting so high reviews.
You said something interesting there that just piqued a thought in my head. So, back to Star Trek and Sulu. So, the original series is actually a separate universe from what we have now. They're actual alternative realities, and we've made note of that. We even had Spock from the original universe come in as the alternate universe old Spock, where since he's come back because of science. Since he's come back, now everything has changed. That was the first movie. And now we're sitting in a position where perhaps Sulu wasn't gay in the original universe. Maybe that's just what happens when you go back in time. I don't know. Suddenly you become gay. I don't know. I know that might sound bad, but I feel like that's how it's been inserted here, that the gay aspect of his character, which, I mean, he's not a flamboyant gay man, obviously. George Takei is not a flamboyant gay man. I mean, they're just, oh my. You know, they're not flaunting it, so I don't know why we have to flaunt that particular character's sexuality when we haven't had any care whatsoever to begin with about that character's sexuality. We care that he can take command of the ship if need be, which is what apparently is going to be happening in the new movie. He's going to be the commander. Are we just trying to say, oh, the commander of the Enterprise is gay? Okay. If that's the case, then let's make Star Trek movies separate from this one where the commander of the ship is gay. I think that would make a stronger statement saying that we are going to put the future of this franchise on the back of a character who is different from the characters that have come before. Why do we have to adjust the characters we have now to... It's not even trying to appease a particular demographic. We're just doing it to do it. I don't know. It kind of just bugs me that we're just doing it out of the blue. It just doesn't feel like we have to.
The bit I wrote was there were some comments from Simon Pegg and some from the writers and whatnot who they felt it was kind of an homage to the long history of Star Trek, not just the canon, but also the actors who, like, they thought Takei would be thrilled with it, which, you know, like, it's kind of understandable. It's like, hey, your character, we wanted to better represent not just the character, but you, because you were such a big part of the character. And at the same time, like, I agree with you that it is, like, this is an alternate universe Star Trek, so why can't we have it be whatever we want it to be? And if we wanted to better represent, you know, like, what we think would be an homage to these characters and these, you know, this long, illustrious history, why can't we do that? You brought up an interesting point, like, with that whole, this is an alternate universe thing, and them being able to bring back the, like, true universe and have, like, Nimoy and whatnot have that conversation. It's kind of this interesting point where it's almost meta in a way where it's like acknowledging that it is a recreation of the same. Like, we have something with which we are viewing this in relation to. And so it's kind of acknowledging that it is a remake, and remakes are completely different and separate, but they always pull from the original. That being said, it kind of makes it weird that Takei thinks it is so far from the original with his character, and that might have been part of, you know, the whole element of him being closeted at the time for a lot of creating that character. Like, he was this character that was straight, and he himself had to pretend to be straight, so it was kind of this double acting, not to, like, impose any psychological analysis of, like, a, you know, person or whatnot, but it's interesting that he thinks it's that far removed. It's different, like, with the same thing with Ghostbusters. Like, there wasn't that much of a history really for them to be rewriting, for them to make these characters suddenly female. There was some commentary on the analysis on, like, well, what if we had them rewritten as guys? What would it have been? Just a bunch of, you know, Disney stars? It would have been a Zac Efron. It would have been, like, that kind of thing. Do we really want that from Ghostbusters? Like, I was happy because I saw, you know, a bunch of comedians, and that's what I was happy about.
I will definitely add something about Ghostbusters. I just noticed that Bill Murray is making a cameo in it, so that is the most important news of today. It has been blast, so it's been, basically. No, actually, I'm fine with it. I just wish that it would have been, instead of a new story than a reboot, it would have just been another sequel. Maybe their daughters. Maybe they all had daughters, and that would have been fine, taking over the business. For me, I would have loved to have seen, like, some of that history follow over, even a couple of cameos to where notice Bill Murray is playing someone completely different. Would have been fun. And, I'm completely cool with the all-female cast. I just wish they would have kept it as a sequel for just some of the history. For me personally, I know the second one kind of was not the best movie ever, but the first one I loved watching all the time.
Well, since we're talking about remakes, reboots, and revamps, let's move on to one of our main topics, Guardians of the Galaxy. A couple years ago it came out. Obviously, it was a pretty big smash hit, and it was kind of an unexpected smash hit. I mean, you had not no names. I mean, you had people who were obviously, in the public eye. You had Bradley Cooper, you had Vin Diesel, Chris Pratt, who was mostly television at the time, Zoe Saldana, and you had Josh Brolin and a couple other people who were pretty prominent, but you wouldn't have expected they would be tossed into a film, and then suddenly this film is just great. You wouldn't expect that. And this is coming off the heels of like Thor 2, which was mediocre at best, and a slew of just other comic book movies that just adhered to the same formula that we've come to expect out of, say, Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, Thor 2, even Thor 1, Captain America 1 even. It hasn't been really until Captain America 2 and Guardians of the Galaxy where we started to deviate a little bit from this formula to try to accommodate to a newer style of film that wasn't just going to be a copy and paste from the movies that came before, at least at Marvel. So could we agree here that maybe utilizing characters that we don't see all the time might be the best course of action? Because let's be honest here, Thor 2 was mediocre. Thor 1 was fairly mediocre at best, just as a movie. Not even saying that it was a flop at the box office. It was just mediocre at best movies. And this is supposed to be one of the pillar characters of the Avengers universe. But it feels like these no-name Peter Quill and Rocket Raccoon are suddenly the big names that you want in your movies. Drax the Destroyer. Do we think it's a smarter idea for Disney and Marvel to move on and do some characters maybe we haven't even heard of before?
I agree 100%. I think that it was actually smarter for this. This is one of I'm going to say that it was actually like my favorite of the Marvelverse so far. I think it was definitely one of the best movies to introduce a bunch of characters. I'm really looking forward to the Black Panther. Just throwing that out there. That one is the one I'm really hyped for. But I agree. I thought that Thor 1 was completely backwards thematically. Like, I think if you watched it in reverse, you'd think that that was the actual film, where you have a bunch of drab colors, where it's mostly yellows and browns and grays, and then it goes up to the really fancy stuff, the Asgardian color wheel and everything like that. It looked backwards to me, and I didn't think much of it. With the first Captain movie, they have a montage through the part that I thought was going to be the most interesting part, when they get together, this team, and they fight. A lot of these big name characters, it's always been like, it seems like they have to throw in so much information immediately and then get to a really big reveal to make a really big payoff. And I think you lose a lot of the character in that. I think you lose a lot of the development. And having these no-name come out of nowhere, they've already developed a bunch. Like, you've already got Rocket Raccoon, you've already got you've already got Groot, and you've already got all these like backgrounds. You've got all these things that are motivating them. You've got all these things already in there. And you don't really need to know about it because they're just going to have a fun time. And I thought that was the greatest kind of just starting point for that. Like, you've got a great team. They're already going at it. They're really fun to watch, and you still have a good payoff. Like, you don't need to know everything individually about them.
There's no need for an origin story.
No, there's not. And they kind of did that with the animated series anyway, which was pretty good, but again, subpar. And I'm glad that they fit that in the animated series rather than the like actual film. I would have been really sad if they put any of the animated series stories into a movie.
Yeah, definitely Vin Diesel's best acting as Groot. I mean, that was actually, I'm just kidding because it was no Fast 7 or 8 to come out, so, but it was good. I don't know, I really liked Captain America, the original one, the first Avenger, that had the feel of The Rocketeer, which was by the same director as well as that. But I kind of have to agree with you on that as far as they rush through a lot. But again, I guess we should just be happy in this day and age that we're getting superhero movies that are different than the ones that I was growing up in the 80s. The Captain America back then was good for me. I was cool with it. But looking back at it, and even The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, which was good and still holds up. Oh, let's forget about Spawn with John Leguizamo again. Ugh.
I still hold that the best like large name property superhero movie origin story is the Powerpuff Girls movie. I'm still I'm gonna stand by that. I wrote that article forever ago, but I still stand by it. There was a Powerpuff girl movie, and it was really well done, very well animated, and it had the whole origin story without overplaying its hand. It didn't jump into super big fights. It had a lot of good development all the way up to the end, and I thought it was great. But this was forever ago, but it came out at the same time as Like Mike and Men in Black 2, which were both beyond subpar. So, like, you know, it had a really bad, it came out at the wrong time because everyone thought these other ones are going to be better, and it did not have a good trailer, so no one really thought to go and see it, but it was great. Yep, back in the day.
But you're talking about the origin story. I mean, for Powerpuff Girls, you get the origin story in the opening credits.
You do, and that's why it's so weird to have a movie that explores that and actually beefs it out to something that is full length. It wasn't just an episode that was full length. It was a movie. It was well built up.
Steve likes origin stories.
What about Wolverine Origins? Yeah, right?
Someone told me that it was good, and I told my parents we should get it, and then after we watched it, I apologized to each of them. And they're like, oh, it wasn't so bad. And then I started talking about it, and they're like, oh, no, you're right. That was bad. It was really bad. I still feel guilty about that.
You should, because it's the worst movie ever made. Maybe we'll write an article one day for the website and just say Wolverine X-Men Origins, the worst movie ever made.
Like I thought we had made enough superhero movies at that point that we had gotten past that. Like we had already made Spawn. Like you'd think the industry as a whole, like they watch themselves and they're like, oh, we made that mistake. Now we've learned from it. But no, we didn't learn at all. Origins is a reminder not to get.
But I think that even brings us back to our original topic, where Guardians of the Galaxy is a film that takes characters that we don't know and turns them into characters that we want to know. I mean, with X-Men, they're really inconsistent over at Fox, making X-Men films, not necessarily formulaic like Marvel does, because Marvel does make the Marvel films formulaic. But they definitely have an inconsistency with quality. I mean, they'll have, 2 good directors and then 2 really not great writers and directors who just don't know what they're doing with a superhero movie. And that's the problem, where you can have Days of Future Past, then you follow up with Apocalypse, which is okay. But the preceding films include X-Men Origins Wolverine and X-Men 3 The Last Stand. The Samurai one, just Wolverine, which it's not a bad movie. It's not a good one, but it's a good Wolverine standalone film, I believe. I don't believe that the origins of Wolverine for the X-Men Origins film was the best one. And Mike is motioning about Blade, and I was lucky enough to watch Blade, I think 2 with Triple H. I think it was Blade 2 that had Triple H in it, and then I called it a day with Blade because Triple H was in it. And yeah.
So I don't remember if this is just a rumor. It's part of the rumor mill. Goes around, take it with a grain of salt. But have you guys heard of the possible Norman Reedus for a new Ghost Rider?
I have.
That I can see working, and it's kind of sad that the last Ghost Rider was what it was. It was very Nicolas Cage, and it makes me really sad because Nicolas Cage was one of those really big fans, and you want to be happy for him to get like that role of the comic book character that he grew up just loving. But at the same time, I'm sorry, Nicolas Cage, but no, none of that. We don't need that. But Norman Reedus, though, I could see that working out, but at the same time, it's not just the actor, it's also the writer. We've also seen that. It's also the director. Like, we've seen some really showy movies that look great, but then you watch them, and it's just so much of that. It's like, I don't know about this. This is too much. Like, we saw that with Superman, Batman versus Superman. And also, the thing with Apocalypse, to me, is it looked like 3 movies shoved together. It looked like a montage of 3 different films that, like, if I were to fall asleep, I would think that I was watching a marathon. If I were to, like, pass out at any point in time during the film, I would have woken up again and thought, man, the second one's playing. I missed the whole conclusion to that last one. And at the end realized, nope, that was one big mess.
I prefer to call him Nicholas Coppola by his original name. I understand why he didn't want to choose such a great name to use for his career. I don't know. Yeah, I'd be cool with Norman Reedus. Yeah, right. You can't cage the beast. That is exactly what it was. I'm trying to think of actually brainstorming characters that he could play. He didn't work for Superman. I saw the footage of that for the test footage. He just doesn't have the body type for it, and it's not being mean. It just looks weird. Not his body. I mean, okay. Wow. Yeah. Well, okay. Yes, it kind of does. But God, what character could he play?
What character could Nicolas Cage play? Oh God, I don't have a clue.
I think one of the Batman villains. I can see that. I can see him playing an Enigma. It'd be different, but I can see him playing it. Like, we've got some pretty eccentric characters that have been playing the Joker. Like, I wouldn't go so far to say he'd play the Joker, but I can see him playing a really interesting enigma, like the Riddler. He's kind of got that eccentric, like, wide-eyed kind of. Hey, have we all seen Face Off? Scarecrow, I could work. You haven't seen. I have a cop. I have. I actually have two VHS copies, the director's cut, and and Face Off is pretty fantastic. Face Off is. Just look up Face Off. Everyone should watch it. But it's Nicolas Cage as a terrorist, and him being eccentric as all get up, gun wielding. I can definitely see him playing a Scarecrow or an Enigma. I want to say Enigma just because of how much energy he can bring to the screen, especially from after seeing him in Face Off. I can see that.
I think Nicolas Cage would make a great Lex Luthor. We went with Jesse Eisenberg, and now we can go with Nicolas Cage. I say let's work through the characters and the actors who just don't fit those characters first, and then we'll sooner or later come up and find the one we want, which is going to be a dude who works for Marvel. And it's going to be a sad day when he can't contractually come over to DC.
I'm going to go with that. Like, I agree with that. I don't want to say 100%, but I definitely agree with that. The last Lex Luthor we had with Jesse, he doesn't have as much energy. Like, he has this sense of, oh, yeah, I'm calm and whatnot, which was, some people told me that, oh, well, that's the character, that he's, he's a billionaire, whatnot, and he's all, like, he seems like one of those entrepreneur types, but then underneath that, he's this cold, calculated. I can't see Jesse going, like, 0 to 60 like Nicolas Cage can. So I think Nicolas Cage could fit that. I don't know exactly how I'd want him to play it, because Lex Luthor is much more controlled and brilliant than eccentric, and you want that 0 to 60 flip where he goes from the personable, charming, but at the same time, like, I don't see Nicolas Cage as that charming in a way. Like, I see him kind of like, in a way, slightly creepy uncle, and I always imagine Lex Luthor as like one of those charming figures, because he's one of those corner faces where everyone believes what he says, or for whatever reason they trust him to some degree to not put him in prison forever.
Let's go back to using Kevin Spacey. I mean, seriously, I think he was underutilized in, was it that Man of Steel movie? I mean, it was just a horrible movie. Superman Returns. It wasn't the best movie, but I honestly think he had the best performance. So that's what I have to say.
In defense of Man of Steel, like, it was supposed to be campy. Like, that's kind of, I want to say it still had a lot of those campy elements from like the old Superman, where it's kind of, this is basically a James Bond villain. But the whole thing with Superman is that he's so good it never works, and also he's invincible and overpowered. But yeah, that's my 2 bits on that.
My 2 bits were said when I said Nick Cage should be the new Lex Luthor. So we're gonna move on to our hidden gem of the week, or I guess by week, because we're only gonna be doing this every 2 weeks. And I'm gonna give it over to Mike, because Mike chose this movie for us this week, and it's a little flick you might know called Real Genius.
All right, it has Val Kilmer, probably one of his best movies, to be honest with you. Let's see what the tagline says. It says, teenage geniuses deal with their abilities while developing a laser. It's just a fun movie. I just enjoy it. I don't want to give anything away, because if people haven't seen it, if you have seen it and we do spoil it a little bit, you might want to walk away from this for just a couple minutes if you do want to see this movie. I really like it. I don't know what happened to Gabriel Jarrett, the other lead, but I don't know what happened to Val Kilmer either, pretty much. But let's look and see what Val Kilmer's doing lately. Not much. Either way, I guarantee that you're gonna like this movie. It's just fun. I can't even. Oh, wait a sec. The Iceman is returning. I just noticed the Iceman is returning. So we have what day is this? It doesn't have a release date. It's in development. Top Gun 2. Everybody said, oh. I'm like, I am cool with that. Man. Okay, getting back to Real Genius. What did you guys think? I'm always a fan of it.
I thought it was a film that was indicative of the 80s itself. You had a lot of montage sequences that are really characteristic of the films back then, especially the comedies, especially the ones involving kids. You had the goofy sabotages of, there's the weird brainiacs. You're like, just a lot of goofy comedy, which we don't get too much today. We get a lot of harsh, cruel comedy in our comedies now. And I feel like Real Genius was a film that I watched this morning, actually, that really harkened back to a time when, even if the comedy was kind of mean, it was still lighthearted. And it was meant as a joke. And I feel like the stuff that we have now is meant to be mean. I was watching a couple of interviews with Robert Osborne a couple years ago, and he was talking to Alec Baldwin. And Alec Baldwin had something to say regarding Ben Stiller's comedic style. And I feel like that's what our comedic style has turned into. You had Charlie Chaplin back in the 30s and 40s and 20s and 10s, whatever. From Hollywood's beginning to the 60s, you had Charlie Chaplin just kind of hanging around doing random stuff. And he had a really good, strong comedic presence on screen. And then Robert Osborne liked to compare Chaplin to Ben Stiller. And Alec Baldwin said that Ben Stiller's comedy is cruel. He makes fun of terrible situations, and he doesn't resolve it with a lighthearted humor. He resolves it by just admitting it's a terrible situation and we're going to laugh about it. I mean, you can even look at Tropic Thunder and say, well, yeah, dude gets his head blown off and we're sitting there, putting his head on a pike, pretending that it's a prop when everyone in the movie knows it's not a prop. And then we just go about and, commit, all sorts of jokes on racism and, war, politics. But it's still funny. We can admit that it's a funny movie. But it's definitely, and Mike's like, I'll disagree with you there. But you can look at the 80s films, and you'll notice that there's a distinct difference in how we laugh. I felt like the 80s movie moved along a lot slower. The pacing was not even close to what we have now, which I'm not against. Not even close. But the humor itself was built up through, I'd say, good humor. It's not just a joke. It's not a YouTube, haha, I pulled his pants down in front of all the class, and now he's emotionally scarred for the rest of his life. It's, haha, I pulled his pants down in front of the whole class. Everyone had a good laugh. He's going to come back and get me later. It'll be fine. That's what I appreciate about it. Real Genius is that the humor was good humor. It wasn't mean humor.
I completely agree with this, kind of harkening back to the 80s. Being a 90s kid and whatnot, I grew up with all of this stuff so much, and it reminded me so much of like the first time that I was watching like the Mighty Ducks or whatnot as a kid. And it's very much that kind of lighthearted, fun humor. It has the montages and all of those like very kind of, I noticed there were a lot of trope like 90s kid film moments, but not many of them felt contrived or like shoehorned in, which we had a lot more in like the 90s. Nothing felt overly, it didn't feel like it aged. It did not age poorly. It's a good movie. I was very pleasantly surprised because I saw 80s and the cover looks a little different and it's got this picture of Bill Kilmer and I'm like, I know him from so many like I Am Stoic character films, and I was a little worried, but then this comedy actually really shows off a lot of his range. And I was really pleasantly surprised, and I was really getting into the characters, and I really enjoyed it. There was only one moment where it was, the sit out on a starry night, look up at the stars, cliche moments where I'm just like, oh yeah, cliches happen in the 80s. A lot of these films are a lot like that. But there were a few different moments where it just like one or two moments where I'm like, oh, should have seen that coming. But again, like none of it was overly dark. There was kind of a really dark beginning that kind of made me feel like I escaped from New York, almost kind of dark. This is a dark, brutal, grim world kind of thing. And then it went into this kid-friendly stuff. And then later on, not to spoil anything, but as it starts to have resolutions, I'm worried like they're going to kill the kids. What? No, they can't kill the kids. But that's kind of the thing that instantly pops into my head, that the kids are going to be, their life will be threatened at some point. And that's kind of what's happened with a lot of our kid movies now, where death is an imminent threat for a lot of these like preteen films. And it's like they always have to up the stakes to have it being that hard. But they never go there here, which I was really happy about. Like, it kept everything lighthearted and ended a good popcorn film with popcorn, and I loved that.
I love this movie. I've loved it ever since I saw it the first time when I was a kid. It came out in '84, so I know it's always been fun. I do love the popcorn scene. I'm not trying to spoil anything, but it is great. I mean, but I have to agree with you that the jokes are they're fun. They're not mean. I don't know where. Yeah.
With the popcorn, there's this one threat of someone possibly getting seriously hurt, and I'm expecting them to like come out of this area like scorched and burnt and terrible, and that it's gonna be the bully, and we horribly destroyed them, we hurt them, and we scarred them for life, and now that's what happens if you get back at bullies. But it wasn't that. It was kind of back to that everyone's gonna we're gonna play pranks back and forth, but no one's getting hurt. He came out of this last prank laughing about it, kind of thing. Like, yes, there are bullies and whatnot, but you know what? People are people, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna get even, but we're not gonna do anything that's like damaging, even though it could have very well gone that way in the in the context of the film, it could have gone horribly, but it didn't go there, and it was really fun. And I encourage anyone who is a kid of the 90s or grew up like with all of those kind of 80s trope films and they like it to definitely enjoy this. It was good. The other thing that I really liked was that all the problems were solved with science, and the whole getting back to films that make kids excited about science. Like that's kind of come back a little bit with the Iron Man, and in I think it was Iron Man 3, they've got that one child actor moment. Was it Iron Man 3 I'm thinking of with the Mandarin? Yes. They got this child actor who's kind of, he's fidgeting in his garage, and that really harkened back to kind of these days for me. Like that whole, there's that one kid who's super smart and he's got a big lab and it's super cool and everyone wants to be him. They want to be the kid scientist. And it really threw back those kind of like memories of being a kid and wanting your own laboratory. And this is the kind of film that got kids excited into that and excited into science, and I love seeing that in film.
I thought it was a good movie. It was a good way to start my morning. It wasn't depressing with the news or anything like that. It was just good. It was a fun time. And I feel like we miss that a lot in our films today. Everything's got to be the next biggest explosion, cruelest laugh, the biggest drama. And this one was just a bunch of kids doing kid stuff, and like not even like kids. Like we're teenagers.
20-something college students still having fun and actually enjoying their college education without, harming people or getting completely intoxicated or anything like that and like making bad life choices. Just a whole bunch of good fun.
It actually reminded me a lot of Animal House. Like if Animal House was filled with smart people, this would be pretty close to what it would have been. And I actually kind of like that.
I never thought about it that way, but yes, that is definitely a good description for it. It just kind of reminds me of Space Camp as well. Have you guys ever seen Space Camp, the movie? Oh, that was in 1986.
I think if I remember right, I did, but I'm pretty sure I liked this more than I remembered liking that. I don't know if that's the age now coming at it or what, but I felt like Space Camp was, I don't want to say campy, but it felt like more contrived than this did. Like this, we start off with this character is super brilliant, so any of the wacky stuff he does doesn't sound like insane. So it's neat. Like I think Real Genius does for kids what they tried to do with that World of Tomorrow film. Was that the name? World of Tomorrow, the one with the pin, or Land of Tomorrow, something like that. There's this one with a pin, and
is it the one with George Clooney?
Yes.
I think that's Tomorrowland.
Yeah. I feel like Tomorrowland was trying to do what Real Genius did back in the day with this whole excited about science in the world and have that whole little bit of political element where it's like everyone should, be trying to save the world and they should try to be smart and we should be, actors and we should be artists and we should be scientists and we should be writers who inspire people. I feel like they tried, but this does it a lot better because at the end it has this, like they're figuring out all this problem and then they realize the trick, the little thing and the reveal, and then they're like, oh no, we can't have that, so they just immediately go against it. It doesn't like overplay that kind of political hand, which was really fun. It's a good movie. Great soundtrack, by the way, as well. Yeah.
It is an amazing soundtrack. I definitely recommend going and watching it. Actually, stop listening right now and go watch it. No, actually, don't stop listening because I don't know what else we're going to talk about. So, yeah, probably not a good thing to say, hey, stop listening. But
and with that, I think Mike has capped us off. So, you capped me off. You capped it.
Tropic Thunder was a good movie.
Tropic Thunder is a pretty okay film. Gross out. No, we don't. Have you seen some of the movies with good reviews too, Steve?
Good movies, though.
Not some of them.
The only good part of Tropic Thunder is Tom Cruise.
And yeah, we have that on record now that he said that there was some good part of Tropic Thunder, and I'm not going to do that.
I like Tropic Thunder. It's a fun little movie. All right, guys, we have to wrap it up. Thank you for joining us, and remember to stay critical.